Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV. Well, today, Herpanwo TV viewers, I'm going to show you my collection of David Icke books. And as you can see here, I've got quite a few. But, believe it or not, this contains all of them. This contains all of David Icke's books, every single one. There's only one missing, and that's a book he co-authored with John Rappaport, which doesn't really count as one of his, I suppose, because it's more of a kind of interview with David done by Rappaport. So here we are, all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 books. Now that David is quite a prolific author. You know, most of these books were actually written also, you know, in his post-wake up days. There's, you know, there's very, very few people, very few authors can actually have claimed to have produced this many. Yeah, so David could feel justly proud of himself for this collection. Now, of course, David, you know, David is one of these strange figures. I mean, he was a footballer for a long time. He lived a very conformist life, and like many conformists, you know, he eventually reached the point where he woke up. The thing about David was, because he was a famous person, he was a celebrity, a footballer, then a TV star. His waking up was sort of a very public affair, and he was subjected to much ridicule, which probably made it a lot more difficult for him to wake up than it would be for you or me. You or I have to put up with the ridicule of our friends and family and our acquaintances, which may number a few hundred people. David had to put up with the ridicule of millions of people. When he appeared on the Wogan Show in 1991, the audience were laughing, the TV shows were laughing, the critics in the newspapers were laughing. He was a joke, as he said. A comedian only had to mention my name, and they'd get laughs. So David really, I think, deserves some credit for that. Now, I know what a lot of you are going to think now, and I can see BeatsArt77 is tapping away at his keyboard already, furiously and frantically leaving comments for me on this subject. David is one of these people who, you know, if you express any admiration for him, you're a follower. You know, people say, and even within the sort of conspiratorial aware community, you know, it's actually quite trendy to be anti-Icke. And I put a link in the description box actually, because this is something I've noticed. You know, it's almost a sign of maturity to be saying, "Oh, I'm not into David Icke, man. I was for a bit, but I got over that, man. I got over it." You know, and I mean, I'll go into details in the article, but basically there's this sort of like anti-Icke poser culture within the so-called awakened people community, you know, which irritates me. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is to try and counter that. This is why I'm doing this review of his books. It's like if you, for instance, if I've just done a video about Lyle Watson, I've read a lot of Lyle Watson's books. Does that mean he's my guru and I'm his follower? You know, there's other people who admire philosophers like Nietzsche or Sartre or someone like that. I mean, does that mean they're a follower, they're a guru of his cult? Because that's what people describe David as. They call him a cult leader, they call him a guru who has a band of acolytes, you know, and the people who go to his live shows and read his books are described as sort of like brainwashed cult members, you know, rather like the Heaven's Gate or, you know, the Jim Jones cult or something like that, which is, you know, it tends to be ignorant critics who say things like that, you know. I just find it very, very strange how you could admire a philosopher like Sartre, you know, like Karl Marx, something like that, and or Ayn Rand, for instance, and you could admire them and just admire them, and they can inspire you, but you're not accused of being a follower. As far as David goes, he's been one of the most influential people in my life. There's no doubt about that. You know, for the first few years after I sort of like got my head out of the sand, you know, I lived, ate, slept, and breathed David Icke, and I still do respect the man, and I follow everything he does in terms of getting the information from him. And he's someone I take my hat off to, and I'm grateful to, because he has helped me to see the world very differently in a much better way. And I do. I think he's a great man. Does that mean I'm a follower of his? Does that mean he's my guru and I'm his cult acolyte? No. It just means that. And when I say I admire him and I respect him, it means just that and no more. And why is that? Why can't that be enough? Why does that not? Why do some people just not expect that? Why do so many people polarize it? And that's the question I want to ask. And as you'll see, I don't agree with everything he says. And I think he's quite wrong on a lot of things. Right, and these 17 books by David Icke. Now this one is the book which started them all, launched them all. Truth Vibrations, published 1991 by Gateway Books. He basically, he had this experience in a hotel where he felt he heard voices coming at him. He felt a presence around him, and then he started to hear voices. He visited a psychic who spoke to him, and this set him off on a long journey where he basically experienced a very, very rapid and very catastrophic, in a way, revolution in his life, which basically swept away everything that was there before and brought in his new life. And he went on travels around the world, meeting people, doing energy healing and things like this. And you read through this and you can see actually there's a revelation of the kind of state he was in. And that, in the several books in a minute, you'll see that becomes even more pronounced. What you have here is a story of a man who experienced this enormous change in his life, and he tries to deal with it as comprehensively as he can. And this book was really the start of all of them. Now then, this is a very, very little known book which he published next, by JC Press, and it's which is short for, what is it? It's short for something. John Carpenter Publishing, right? Now this is, as I said, this book is out of print now, and it's basically a continuation of Truth Vibrations, and it's quite a short book. It's quite easy to read. It's just a little sort of like follow on from that. As in a way as this one, although this one was more mass market. This is another Gateway publication, Heal the World, which again is called the Do-It-Yourself Guide to Human and Planetary Transformation. And there's that very famous picture of him he still uses today. And it explains things such as the spiritual awareness he was coming into, the chakra system, things like that. Again, it's slightly shorter than Truth Vibrations. Bit of a follow on there. Now then, that's it. This is the next book, and this creates a remarkable departure. I mean, for instance, just look at that face there. This is the same guy who you saw in the last two books, but look at him. He's only 41 there, but he looks to me about 61. He looks older than he does now, all these years later. This is called Love Changes Everything, a book that's also out of print. And I think this is the book, when you read through it, you find it. This is one of the most harrowing of his books to read, because you see basically his mental breakdown, which was an extremely painful period of his life. And it goes into more. It still contains information. He very, very bravely hangs on to his mission to educate and to enlighten and to spiritually, wake people up. He talks about, for instance, like the colours, like the gold and the white and the things like that. He describes how the energy of colours. There's a reason why the book is this colour, for instance. But I mean, just look at that picture. It says it all. A photo on the. You can almost feel the agony inside there, can't you? Those books, those four books. What I call these books. I call these books his early period. He just used words like turquoise period. Sounds like a gynecological condition, doesn't it? Turquoise period. That's basically. I think this sort of like represents the early period of his writing, whatever you choose to call it, and it stops with that book there. Love Changes Everything. Now, before the next period begins, there's a sort of like interlude with this. Now, this was actually published by Warner Warner Books, and it was called In the Light of Experience. Don't ask me to lend you this because it's out of print. It's very valuable and these are very hard to come by. You may be able to find a copy somewhere, but they're not easy to find. It's basically his autobiography. It includes pictures. You see, there's his first photo there when he's a little baby. Oh, and there's him looking like a little 3-year-old. There's school photos in here, pictures of him as a footballer. And basically it goes through his life. There's his mum and dad, you know, who passed away then. It basically goes, it's a story of his life, basically. And it's very candid. It's a very candid story of his life. He goes into more detail about the various problems he had with his family, you know, which caused a lot of this pain he was experiencing. He had some terrible trouble. He had some most terrible trouble, which eventually led to his marriage breaking up, things like that. On top of this enormous revelatory kind of revolution that was going on in his life, it must have been extremely difficult for him. But that is a fascinating read. That is very, very interesting indeed. In the Light of Experience. Right, now we come on to another part, another period, and yeah, there's a big transition here to another period of his life, which I call the conspiratorially aware period. What happened was, if you go online and you look at David's 1994 lecture in Liverpool, which is available free online, he describes how he was doing a speech sometime in the early period of his awakening, and a man came up to him with 2 blue shopping bags full of papers. And these papers were information on the Bilderberg Group, on the Council on Foreign Relations, on various other things, the Illuminati, and basically outlines the what we call the conspiracy for the New World Order, which I've myself am very much aware of, and I'm sure many of you are too. A little, you know, I should mention actually that the man with the 2 blue plastic bags is actually someone I know. He's a friend of mine. And I have to mention at this point that he's not at all happy with the way David has used this information. I think he feels that David has taken this information and kind of put it in his books without crediting the source, without crediting him as the person who sort of told him, gave him this information. He hadn't said, "Look, I found it from this guy. Thanks very much." Now I'm not sure if that's fair or not. I think everyone who writes books uses a certain amount of information in their books which were in other books. Now David does include the sources in all his books, but these sources are not the man who gave him the blue plastic bags. This guy I know, this friend of mine. The person David credits is the original sources of the material that my friend found. So in a sense, I mean, I think my friend is actually maybe being unfair to David in the sense that you know, all he did was give David. He gave David some information which David then used in his studies. But I mean, the friend himself. I mean, I do that to people sometimes. I pass them papers. I don't expect them to sort of like thank me for it, but in their writings which they use. So I think he's maybe been a bit unfair there. Anyway, this is the first book of David's conspiratorial period, The Robots' Rebellion. An excellent read. It's a very, very good, simply written book which is one which you can give to your friends quite easily. It's the first. It's published by Gateway. This is another Gateway book. So again, the Gateway, the mainstream New Age, basically Gateway represents, and Warner Books, the one that published In the Light of Experience, is a very, very mainstream publisher. So David, in a sense, is still sort of in the mainstream, at least in both the mainstream and the New Age mainstream. But this is the story of spiritual renaissance. This goes into the history of the Illuminati, the New World Order, the Bilderberg Group, etc. All the things we're very well familiar with. And there's only a small part at the end which sort of like goes into the spiritual side and the nature of reality and things like that, which is covered in great detail in the early period of his work. That is very well worth reading. You know, I think it's still in print, and I think you can still get a copy of it. Now we come to the second of the conspiratorially aware period, And the Truth Shall Set You Free. Again, this is a classic. It's recently been brought out in a new edition, a big size edition like this. I call the big format books like this. It's recently been brought out again, 21st Century Edition it's called. Lovely picture on the cover here. Absolutely beautiful picture by Neil Haig. Now Neil Haig is a local writer from Oxford. He lives near me. Well, he lives quite close to me, actually outside Oxford, and he's illustrated lots and lots of David's books. And this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship between Neil and David, which I think works very well and is very. I think they both complement each other in terms of their books. This is actually based on a painting by William Blake, who's a very someone that Neil admires enormously. As he sees the book. Now there is a significant departure. Look at that, Bridge of Love books. This is David's first self-published book. And from this moment on, he's out of the mainstream altogether, including the New Age mainstream, and he has to self-publish. And Bridge of Love books is what is now called David Icke Books. It's David's company. So this is an important departure from his previous work, in that it's self-published. But it's just as successful as other books. And self-publishing is a good idea. I've done it myself. It's good. You get to keep all the proceeds. You don't have to go cap in hand to your publisher for a royalty, 50p of every bloody copy or something like that. So David I think it was a wise decision anyway to do, even if the mainstream hadn't rejected him. Now here we have a kind of, this is the third of David's conspiratorially aware books. Whoa, look at that. It's David naked. Woo. In fact, in the original copies of this, you had like a sticker you could pull off. And underneath, yes, it's all there. But this is good. This is a short, to the point book. Again, which is well worth. It goes into more of the psychology and sociology, sexuality, things like that. It's actually if I had to give one of my friends a first David Icke book to read, and I've done this is the one I would choose. I'd buy them this one first because it's short and it's simple. It's easy. It won't blow their minds too quickly, only just slightly. Again, it's Neil Haig's illustrations in here. Very, very, very good. Really well worth reading. This cover is by Neil Haig as well. Now we have a departure from David's conspiratorial period, and we go on to the next period of his work, which I haven't given a name. I mean, Reptilian period is probably the best way to describe it. And this is something that actually caused him to become alienated even more than he was already. Even some of the alternative conspiratorially aware communities which had embraced him when he wrote these three rejected him after this. And this is kind of about the time that John Ronson did that appalling skit on him, The Lizards and the Jews. Although they say there's no such thing as bad publicity. I hadn't heard of David after 1991 until I watched that programme, and then I read his book. So who was it who said the only bad publicity is no publicity? As I said in my Exopolitics conference review. This is the classic. This is the launching book, the name book, the one which launched his Reptilian career, The Biggest Secret. I mean, what can you say about this? I wouldn't recommend reading this first if you've not heard of David before. I'd read one of the others first. But this is a book that despite its reputation, it's very professionally written. It has a cogency to it, and it's obviously the work of a sound mind and a sound researcher. There, I've said it. The idea of the reptilians, it only sounds crazy when you haven't thought it through. It sounds crazy because it's so different to what you've heard before. Even if you're into the Bilderberg Group and New World Order and stuff like this, it sounds crazy, but it's not crazy. And David it takes a very bold step actually in revealing this, because a lot of other researchers have gone along with it, have actually thought of the reptilian thing before. I mean, it goes back to people like Brian Desborough and other people like that. Even Sitchin, Zachariah Sitchin talks about this up to a certain point, but then he won't go any further by suggesting that the Anunnaki is still here and the Anunnaki still exist. However, we have reports from across the world, many, many, many people who say, I've seen this. I've seen this shape-shifting. People who are otherwise completely and utterly normal. They're like UFO witnesses. They're just ordinary people who happen to have this experience. They're not people who are crazy. They're ordinary people like you and me. Shut up, Beats Art. And we are, and so this. I think there's a case to answer here. Reptilians, I think they're real. The Children of the Matrix. Now, this was originally called Children of the Serpent, but it's been sort of like, it was renamed The Children of the Matrix after David saw the Matrix movie. Again, this is Bridge of Love. All these books after Robots Rebellion, from And the Truth to the most recent one, are all self-published by David Icke Books. This is basically a continuation of The Biggest Secret. You could call it The Biggest Secret Part 2. It goes into more details of the whole Anunnaki reptilian thing. It includes what David learned from Credo Mutwa about the African stream. These books were written in 1999-2000. Of course, in 2001, everything changed, didn't it? Boom. It's on Sunday. It will be 10 years since the 9/11 attacks on New York and the Pentagon, and the Alice in Wonderland and the World Trade Center disaster. Why the official story of 9/11 is a monumental lie. And basically, this is a very interesting book to look to if you want to explain to people why the official story of 9/11 is crap. And it wasn't done by Al-Qaeda. It was an inside job. Then this is one of the good books you can buy. And there are plenty of others by David Ray Griffin, people like that. This is one of them you can get. I wouldn't say it's any better, but it's no worse than any of the others. And it also contains a lot of other information about geopolitics and, of course, the nature of reality, which David puts into all his books. You know, all these books are kind of self-contained. I mean, this is the next one that came out. I think this is actually one of the best. Tales from the Time Loop. Fantastic illustration by Neil Haig on the front. More and more of these illustrations all the way through. Beautiful, beautifully done, and beautifully written. All these books are self-contained. I should point that out. Every one of these books is designed to be read as a single unit. It's a self-contained book, so therefore it's inevitably a lot of the information is going to be repeated, and there's some information is repeated in all these books. Others are just repeated in the conspiratorial ones. Others just in these large format books, the post-reptilian books. But to me, this is one of the best, and it also represents a departure from the reptilian, a sort of semi-departure from his previous works, in that he gets into the ayahuasca and the holographic universe theory. I mean, this is when he has an ayahuasca experience in the Amazon rainforest. He's one of these ayahuasca tourists that you might have heard about. He goes to the Amazon, just like Matthew Deleuze and many other people have done. He takes ayahuasca and he has this experience. Now, what David reports from his ayahuasca experience is totally different to what anyone else I've heard taking ayahuasca has experienced. Now, the voice he hears, the voice talking about everything, infinite love is the only truth, everything else is illusion, which becomes David's catchphrase, and is actually the title of the next book, which I'm going to show you. Now, I'm sure David actually did have this experience. I don't doubt that David had this experience where he heard this voice. But David must be leaving an awful lot of stuff out, because that's ayahuasca. Ayahuasca trips are kind of like they're not just, you don't just take this stuff and then you hear this voice. No. There's sort of like, it's like a trip. You go through various phases where you go from one place to another, and you have different experiences at each stage along the journey. So the ayahuasca trip is not a single experience; it's like a journey, and then you come down, and then it's all done, and then you come back to reality, and then so it's like a kind of journey. It's not a single. You just take the stuff in your voices. So therefore, I do question David over that. I think he's holding something back. He's holding a lot back. Maybe because he didn't want to repeat what other people have had. Maybe it's something private he doesn't want to write about. But he's holding stuff back. He's holding a lot back there. But anyway, this is probably one of David's finest books. I really recommend it. When I first got this, this is the Infinite Love is the Only Truth, Everything Else is Illusion. Fantastic illustration. When I first got this, I was a bit disappointed how thin it was. It's a lot thinner than his others. And I thought, oh, was this, oh dear. He could have written something thicker, couldn't he? But actually, it's still a good book. And like I say, this is one of the best illustrated of all David's books. Excuse me. I actually got a sneak preview of this cover because I I went to one of Neil Haig's exhibitions in London in November 2004, where this was on display. And there's like a colour plate section here. This, like I said, this is one of David's finestly illustrated books, and Neil Haig has done a fantastic job here. These lovely illustrations here in the middle. Goes into more detail of the holographic body, the other things. It's self-contained, and it's designed to be read as an independent book. And it's thinner, but some people might prefer a thinner book. I like the big, thick ones. And you'll be glad to know, with his next book, David Icke Guide to the Global Conspiracy and How to End It, he returns to his original big, thick, full-size format. Again, fantastic illustration. More and more. This is very much it's kind of a repeat of what he's done before, but it has differences in it that are still worth reading. Every book is slightly different. Every book is well worth reading. There's nothing wrong with going over information you've had before. You may see it in a different way. You may pick up something else you didn't get the first time you read it. Well, there's plenty of people who have a favourite movie and they watch that movie over and over again. So what's wrong with having a favourite passage that David writes and reading that over and over again? Yes, very good. Excellent book indeed. Talks about all kinds of things, including Cathy O'Brien and stuff like that, as you mentioned before. That's about microwave water, and he gets into sort of the Schauberger stuff about water and Professor Emoto and things like that. Final, most recent book he's written, not his final one, I'm sure he'll write others. Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, The Lion Sleeps No More. And you can see here, it is David Icke Books now, but basically it's the same company it's always been. Again, a massive illustrated section in the centre, numbering some 30 or 40 pages. Sorry, I'll hold it up a bit closer. See, this is brilliant artwork here by Neil Haig. And I actually went to an exhibition by Neil, another one down in somewhere in Berkshire, and I saw a lot of these pictures first. The symbolism of the lion. I mean, David always puts a slightly different angle on his various books, and has a slightly different theme, but they all relate to the main cause of freedom, of awakening, of transforming the world, transforming the person. Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. The Lion Sleeps No More. Yeah, in it he talks about the moon matrix, which is a completely new subject that I've not heard of before. I mean, he goes into the stuff. I mean, I heard of Immanuel Velikovsky and his theory about the moon. Now, I do. This is one of the things which I do have a problem with. I don't quite buy it. I may be wrong, but I mean, this. I don't think this transmission, this holographic reality, is being broadcast from any place within our universe. I think it's something from beyond it. And looking at some three-dimensional solution for this, the source of this problem, I think is a mistake. And the moon is, I think the moon is a natural body. It may have underground bases on it. It may be hollow to a certain extent, but it's not a construct. It's not a space station with reptilians inside it. The reptilians are not physical, I don't think. They are etheric. But that is David's most recent book, and there he is. Still smiling, still standing bravely after all this time. Now then, so have we come to the end? Not quite. You see, when I started reading David, I began looking at his history, and I looked more. I started with The Biggest Secret, and I went back as well as forward. So I went back through his previous books. Now, David, like I say, went through this experience in 1991, this awakening experience. But David has written before then. He wrote before his awakening experience. He wrote 2 books before his awakening experiences, which I do have. Now, the question is, reading through these books from the past, I wanted to see, is there any clue to the future? Do these books contain any information that may give us a clue about where David's going? With retrospect, we can sort of track his awakening even before it actually happened, even before he was aware of it. Well, with this book, it doesn't have to be like this. By Greenprint, this book from the Green Party, you can actually see this. It's a kind of he goes through the environmental, and basically it's basically a review of the policies of the Green Party, which have not changed much since this was written. David was a Green Party politician for a while. It's something that he soon, lost. He soon lost interest in. He became very disillusioned with, because basically as he says, the Green Party is just the old politics dressed up. As soon as it started to become seriously successful, they started to abandon many of their core policies. But it was experience which led him into a great understanding of politics. And very often, negative experiences can teach us a lot, and I've learned a lot from my negative experiences. But this is Greenprint, which is the publisher that published this. And of course, when David went through his 1991 experiences, they wanted nothing more to do with him, and he wanted nothing more to do with them. Now, this is officially David's first book. You ask people about David's first book, they'll either say Truth Vibrations, or some of them who are more in the know will understand that he did write a book before about green politics. And this book, I think, was written in the 80s sometime, 1990. So it's just before his. It was actually, he started in 1990s when he started going through this experience. It was actually in April 1990 he went to see, or March 1990 he went to see Betty Shine and got his first psychic experience. But that's not his first book. No, this is David's first book. Could be. I paid 20 quid for this, and it's really old. It's a book from 1983 called It Doesn't Have to. It's called It's a Tough Game, Son. There it is, and it's so old it doesn't even have a barcode on it. It's published by Piccolo, which I think is the it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the sixth. It's 6 different publishers have published David's work. This is the first one, Piccolo Books. This is basically designed for sort of teenage boys, young, pre-teen and teenage boys who are thinking of becoming footballers. And it's basically David's guide to the football world. Because David, of course, was a professional footballer and for a tragically short career, although not so tragically, really, when you think about it, because he looks back now and he thinks, well, maybe I was meant to, sometimes you're, silver lining and everything. When you very often negative experiences can, you look back at it and you think, I'm glad that happened. Now, is there any clue? There's some pictures here of David's various footballing heroes, including Peter Shilton, who he absolutely adores. Now, I've written a full review of this book, which I'll put into the links column below, and you can see. Like I said, I picked this up at the Probe conference for 20 quid. It's an absolute collector's item. Don't ask me to lend you this, please. But there is clues in this to David's future. And there's here we are. Where is it? It's in chapter 8. If I can find it. Yeah. What it is, we often look for things. Here we are, the Wonder Boy Beware, 71. I think it's that chapter. You see, there's very often we look for clues in previous works, which may give clues to the future. Now, there are certain phrases in this book. I don't think I can actually find them now, which give you a clue to where David's going to go. Here it is, schoolboy forms. Now then, in one of David's catchphrases in his more recent book is, if you forget everything else I've written in this book, then just remember this one thing. He says, so in other words, he puts it in various ways, like, if you remember one thing from this book, then remember this. And he uses it in his main oeuvre to talk about problem, reaction, solution. But in this book, he used it to talk about schoolboy forms, and that is what they do is he's warning the young boys who have footballing talent, who are spotted by the scouts when they're teenagers, not to sign what he calls the blue form, and that is a form where you're obliged to do an apprenticeship for one club. He's saying don't do it. Just tell him, go in there. Don't sign any of these blue forms, these official schoolboy forms. Just go to the club and say you want an apprenticeship, but it's not under contract, so you can always switch to other clubs if you want. If they say no, then don't worry, because if you're any good, another club will pick you up. And if they say yes, it means you're obliged to play for that club for your entire apprenticeship. So basically, you're stuck there from when you're like 15 to when you're 18. So it's interesting. It's interesting insight for young footballers, and it gives you gives you a clue about what a lot of these heroes, the people we now consider sporting heroes, go through. You know, to get to where they are, and it's quite an attractive thought to imagine a Wayne Rooney washing football boots, doesn't it? You know, or David Beckham messing up his hair, mopping the changing rooms. But that's what the apprentices have to do. They have to basically do dog's body work for the guys on the first, on the front bench and on the first team. Now that is all David's books. That comes to the end of our little review. I will continue to read David's books as he publishes them, and I don't apologise for that. I'm very inspired by David. I'm not scared to admit it. I don't think it makes me a follower. I don't think it makes him my guru. I think it makes him an inspirational person who has given me a lot of information, a lot of hope, and I don't hang on his every word. You know, if he buggered off tomorrow and became a male model or something, or extra on EastEnders, I wouldn't care. Alright, so the information is what I go for. Okay, so I challenge anyone who gets into this. Oh, David, you either love David Icke or you hate him. If you're not against him, then you're one of his followers. Alright, any idiots who say things like that, I challenge that view absolutely, and I think it's completely wrong. I hope you've enjoyed this little review of David's books, and I hope you've enjoyed reading them as much as I have. If you haven't, then get them and read them. Even the ones that are out of print have quite a few second-hand copies floating around. So some of them are a bit expensive, like the smallest book, which is the most expensive of all, 20 quid. But you don't have to read all of them; just get some of them. Well, thank you for watching Panwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.